Welcome to Noble, a network of owners, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. Here, we focus on the 5 stages of business: launching an idea, establishing a business, hiring employees, creating leaders, and then expanding your impact. We hope you enjoy today's session.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be with you guys. I love talking to new and upcoming entrepreneurs. A little bit about the bio. Thank you for the bio, Jeff. Honestly, I started my entrepreneur journey about 6 years ago. I remember, wasn't that long ago, I was trying to bootstrap off the ground. And some days I still feel like I am. It takes a certain kind of person, a certain kind of diligence, and a certain amount of faith, because sometimes faith is all you have. You're leaning on because you don't know what else to trust. And so how my journey began is I actually started out a technology consulting business. I had been working in IT and security for years at that point, and I had a pretty good career, I think, in terms of breadth of career. I worked for international payment processors, I worked for higher ed, and I worked for small businesses. And I wanted to take that and watch the market. Well, I started my business in 2018, and then 2 years in, what happened? We all know 2020 came around. And I know every single person here remembers 2020 and shudders a little bit of that whole year. It was, everything changed on so many levels. And unfortunately, what I was seeing as this trusted technology advisor was, the security stuff changed. Threats were getting real. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask for a little audience engagement. If you comment in the chat, just put yes or no. How many of you know somebody or have experienced somebody who's been the victim personally or business-wise of some kind of cyber fraud scam? Yes, 100% me. I have 2 family members directly in the last 2 years. It is a growing problem. And I'm going to take you guys to say why it's a growing problem and hopefully give you some real steps as you build out your entrepreneurial journey of how you can safeguard yourself in a way that you can do and manage from here to, I hope, the heights that you're going to excel and hit, right? And that's the end goal here is I want to see you all successful, because I want to start off with a story. One of my very first clients was this tiny little church in Central Ohio. I'm Christian by background. I didn't go into that in there. I'll take a moment to talk about that. I actually used to be a Nazarene pastor. I love working with churches. I still do to this day. It's not my official target audience, but with the branding like Tabernacle Technology Solutions, they somehow find us, and I'm always happy to work with them. Well, there was this church about right up here a year after COVID. 6 people on staff. Most of them were part-time, like 2 full-timers, typical nonprofit church. And I saw as their person, they had me come out and, just do some work, make sure the building was running, make sure the Wi-Fi was up. It was a very low effort gig at the time. And I saw some security concerns. And I tried to communicate those concerns to them, but I didn't know how yet. I didn't know how to present that in a way that the average business would understand. I was too high level, I was too techy. And what happens to that nonprofit? 3 months after I tried to tell them about stuff going on, and I fully own up to it was a failure. I didn't know how to communicate well. A hacker managed to break into the financial administrator's email, get into their bank account, and take this tiny church's entire operating budget and wire it over shores $115,000. That hit me right here. And to add salt to the wound, they had to go back to their congregation because they couldn't run the church. And they had to say, look, we need you, after the congregation gave them the trust of the money in the first place, to give us more money that you meant for God's kingdom, and now some 2-bit criminal has. We need more just so we don't have to shut our doors. Can you imagine? Just take a moment and put your empathy shoes on. Can you imagine how they felt? I was there and I was devastated. And I said, never again if I can help it, right? I want to educate. I want to make sure everyone, big and small, little nonprofits and big businesses, can protect themselves and their hard-won earnings, because it's not easy being an entrepreneur. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into everything. You deserve to have a degree of security in what you've built. So I'm going to go and share my screen. And we'll go into today's topic. So today is the topic is, and I titled this a while ago. Which one are you guys seeing my right tab? What do you see?
It's just flat right now. We don't see your screen yet.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me try this again. It pulled up the wrong tab when I shared. Let me try that one more time. Tech guy having tech problems. Go figure.
Here we go.
There we go. Okay, so the topic is fighting cybercrime. Why it matters, and honestly, what the gap is, right? Why do so many still don't get it? Technology, if you're going to do a business nowadays, you're going to have some kind of technology component. It's part of the game. You're going to have an email account. You're going to have a website. You're going to have some kind of digital presence, some way. Hopefully, if you're monetizing your business of collecting payments, whether that's QuickBooks, Square, whatever, there's a lot of these digital parts that we need nowadays to do our business. Don't even get me started on AI. AI has anybody here in comments can participate? Have you used ChatGPT? Anybody here using ChatGPT? No shame. That's not a trick question. I use ChatGPT. Love ChatGPT. ChatGPT is amazing, but ChatGPT also does a lot of weird things. I don't know if you guys heard about the lawyer case where a judge threw out the case because the lawyer went to ChatGPT, said, "Hey, write me a court document." And ChatGPT just made up stuff, right? Like the AI is a double-edged sword. We can go into that at a different time. So with like any technology, there's amazing opportunity, but there's also risks, and risks that we need to control and manage. I am a big proponent of insurance and cyber insurance specifically. It's not the purpose of today, but if you ever start a business, look into cyber insurance. There's a great amount of brokers in the Columbus region, for example, that can absolutely do that job well. If you ever go in the insurance space, you'll realize when it comes to risk management, there's basically 5 ways to manage risk. You can just avoid the risk. You can obviously do nothing, just retain the risk. You can share the risk, split it up, share the load with multiple people. You can transfer the risk. That's your typical insurance policy, right? I'm paying so-and-so so much money so that if something happens, they take up the bill. And then, of course, you can reduce your risk. This is the obvious one. Great example of this. Please, and I want to encourage you all to drive safely, wear your seatbelts, respect the road, use trends. We're going to talk about all 5 of these today and how it relates to the topic at hand. We're seeing more than 4,000 reported, and that's a key word, reported cyber attacks per day. Unreported, I see somewhere in the millions, but in terms of reported. And unfortunately, the big thing that's driving all of this is money. Cybercrime is now more profitable than the drug trade. Criminals can make more money and have less risk hacking businesses and taking money from them because they live in countries with no extradition treaties like Iran, Russia, North Korea, Thailand. We can keep going on. And unfortunately, we're a very blessed nation when it comes to affluency. There's a lot of wealth that's here in the United States if you're doing the United States. I know it doesn't always feel that way, but when you consider the average Russian citizen makes around $7,000 a year, USD, is the average salary, it puts things in the concept how much power the American dollar has in terms of value. And the average thing I see on my side in our meeting is around $20,000 to $30,000 sometimes for businesses. Now, those are more mature businesses we're going to talk about today, but not always. I have a family member not too long ago, someone who's retired on a fixed income. Hacker took the time to figure out the password to her email, break into her email, figured out by reading her email where she banks, reset her bank password, deleted all the email notifications from the bank, and tried to wire themselves from her 401k $20,000, right? Like this stuff happens to personal people too. Even if they only have a 1 in 10 success rate, that 1 in 10 success rate's 2 years of what the average citizen makes in their country. You now understand what's driving this. It's always, unfortunately, an economic vehicle. What we unfortunately also see, these are just some of the companies that have been hacked in the last few years. They're big enough that they couldn't, no matter what they did, they had to go public. Some very well-known and respected brands. I see 100-fold more small businesses than the big businesses getting hacked every year, but you don't hear about them. Why? It's embarrassing. It's very embarrassing to talk about your hack. There's not really a whole lot of upside for a business. Your lawyer is going to tell you, if you have a lawyer, don't do it. And honestly, your insurance company, if they can help, is going to say, don't do it. There's a lot of cost. Unfortunately, where is 50% of the US economy? And small businesses. You guys are the backbone of the American economy. You guys make this thing run through your hard work and sweat and tears. I read the other day, if anyone here likes business leadership books, I'm a big fan of Gino Wickman and his book Traction. I think Gino's got some really solid ideas. And Gino has a statistic he puts, which is the people who start businesses, the visionaries that have the visions, they're less than 3% of our population, right? You're a very unique class if you're out there starting a business, but you create 2/3 of the jobs in our country. You make this whole thing work. And that's amazing. And I want to, and as an entrepreneur myself, and I know Noble's all about that too, we want to encourage you guys and really applaud that you're taking that step. But unfortunately, the honest truth is when you're starting out, especially as a bootstrap company, you don't have the budget to invest in cybersecurity. Fortune 500 companies have been pouring billions into this for decades. Us, when I started my company, I went out and I was a technology guy, right? I bought here in Columbus, we have Micro Center. I went out and bought it because I knew it was the best thing I get over the shelf at the time. Is all I could afford an ESET subscription, right, for my computer. It was $65 a year. That's all I could afford. I didn't have a budget. I was just trying to get my business off the ground. But because of that, we're viewed as an easier target now. It's way easier to go at smaller businesses at scale using automation, AI, and the new technologies that we hear about in the news every day than it is to go after the big businesses. Big businesses still get hit, but criminals aren't exactly the most ethical, hardworking people on the planet, now are they? They're going to take the path of least resistance 9 times out of 10. I want to stop for a second because I see comments in the chat and I'm not reading well. Oh, okay, just a bunch of yeses. We're good.
Good, good.
Okay. All right. And last but not least, we don't like to talk about this, but if you look at the World Economic Forums, which I would consider a reputable source for financial projections, right now in 2023, the global economy output about $105 trillion total in value. Cybercrime cost the global economy this year, or is projected to cost the global economy this year, around $9.5 trillion, about 10% off the top. What do companies do, big companies, when they take losses? They raise their prices. They pass it downstream. It's how this works. It's what I need to make more money. What I need to do, either to sell more of my product or my service, or I need to raise my prices. There's just nothing else. So what happens is you're actually kind of paying for this right now. Your grocery store prices, they're about 5 to 6% higher on average because cyber criminals are taking the value out of the economy. So you're already being impacted and you didn't know. Everybody here, I can tell you right now, my grocery budget. Oh, I used to be so proud of the fact that I could get a full grocery trip for a family, $250 a month. It was so great. Now I look at a year and a half later and my grocery bill is $410 a month if we're doing really well. I know everybody else here feels that, right? Groceries are not fun. Because some criminals are in Russia, part of that bill is because of that. Not all of it, obviously we have inflation and other things, but some of that bill is from that. And that really grinds my gears because I don't like paying $410 for groceries. I struggle enough with that. I have growing kids, they eat a lot. Okay, that is the context. That's the why, right? Now, what is the how? Well, first you need to understand what is cybersecurity risk. I mentioned that word earlier. I'm going to give you a definition. It's just simply the potential for use, access, disclosure, disruption, modification, or destruction of key information or systems in a business. It can entail financial losses. It can entail damage to an organization's reputation. If you take credit cards, I'll be honest with you, I've done this actually. I had a company, there's a company in the news right now I'm not super happy about. I've used them called Snowflake. You probably have no idea who those guys are, but they're very big in the tech space where I'm at. They did some very bad no-nos on security, some very like gross negligence stuff. And we are moving all of our stuff off of them as quickly as possible. We're not running that risk again. That does happen. Consumers do care short-term about that. And of course, legal. We talk about hacking is intrinsically tied to a whole bunch of Wild West laws, both on the federal and state level. Here in Ohio, for example, those of you who are in Ohio, we do have state data breach laws, and there is no small business exemption. If you lose data that it belongs to somebody else, think email addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, birthdays, of course, credit cards, all that big stuff. You lose anything, you have to tell them. And you have like 60 days to do it. And we're seeing enforcement, unfortunately, for the small business picked up. There's a really famous case about 5 years ago where there's a business in Dublin called the Idea Buyer. They weren't a huge company, but they were doing okay for themselves, about 20 people. They had a cyber incident, a ransomware. Everybody here for the ransomware? Okay, yeah, that one's pretty popular in the news. They declared bankruptcy, but because they handled the incident so poorly, the Attorney General decided to sue them for 2 years, 20% business, because they didn't do any of the data breach law stuff. After they declared bankruptcy, they settled in 2022 when the event happened in 2019. The powers that be realize that they're normal people are noticing, and they get elected based on the normal people and what they see. So take that under advisement. I'm not saying it's going to happen to you. That's not what I'm talking about here today. We are going to see change in the next 3 years there. Giving specific examples, because I know I'm talking high, I want to go low. What kind of cybersecurity risk look like for you as a small business? How many of you have ever gotten a phishing email? Everybody's hand should go up. Holy guacamole. Everybody's hand should go up. It is a real problem. And how many of you have noticed that the last few years, the grammar's gotten a lot better on those phishing emails? Everybody notice that? What came out 2 years ago? Chat GPT. Guess what the criminals figured out they could do when they don't speak very good English? Make the robot write the English for them. So you're going to get that. And unfortunately, what I see is if you click a link on a phishing email, depending on the type, they have somewhere between a 50 to 80% chance of getting access to your computer. That's why they do it. It's a numbers game to them. And so on their computer, they can do all kinds of fun stuff, like ransomware. You've all heard of that. They lock your computer and they ask you for a ransom based on what they think you can pay. I've seen ransoms as low as $400. I've seen ransoms as high as $1.4 million. They really just base it on, hey, we got this computer, we have all this data, we know where they're at. Oh, looks like they're only a one-person business. We think we'll try to do $400. and it's a business to them. And then of course, outdated software. Anybody hate who has Windows or a Mac computer? One of the two. You get those little pop-ups says you should update all the time. Computer randomly reboots once in a while to apply updates. And you're like, oh no, I was in the middle of doing something. What the heck? Yeah, that's because there's these outdated software, and the big companies that power our world are playing whack-a-mole with all these things. They're trying to patch holes as fast as the hackers are creating them, and it's sort of an endless game of cat and mouse where we're stuck in the middle. And this one, I tread carefully. I tread carefully because I don't want to discourage anybody, but I think a lot of people just assume when they pay in the cloud, the security should be included. If you read those big walls of legal text that we click I accept on every time we sign up, you'll almost universally find a big section that says, look, if it's your username and your password, not our problem. We do not provide security for you on the level. Of course, we'll protect our company, like Microsoft, for example. They'll protect Microsoft. But if someone uses your username, your password to log into your email, you've waived all liability. And more importantly, actually, Microsoft updated their terms and conditions like 2 years ago. I don't think they've exercised it yet, to my knowledge. But they updated the condition saying, look, if you cause damages to Microsoft, we reserve the right to sue you. They actually pushed it in the other direction. There is nobody that wants to hold the bag in the cloud world. Now, there's mixed news there on a legal side, and I'm not a lawyer, disclaimer, but I understand that there is a push on the government level because they see the problem. They see how our business will eventually grind to a halt if we don't do something to make the bigger players accept a bigger share of the responsibility on security. Basically, sort of he who has the most aptitude to deal with security should share the bigger responsibility. But unfortunately, the wheels of government turn slow, as everybody here is no doubt aware. We're probably at least 5 years out from seeing anything meaningfully change on that, minimum. I did mention insurance. I'm going to check the chat real quick, though, before I go to this next one, make sure I'm not missing questions. Don't click the links is my mantra. Yes, Jeff. Yes. Do not click. Don't click the pop-ups. Don't click the links. Unless you're 100%, don't click anything. That's a very small piece of advice. All right. Insurance. I do not sell insurance. I am not a licensed insurance agent. I have partners that I would happily recommend you to if you ever want to talk to them about this. But I can tell you the problem I've seen with cyber insurance specifically. There is insurance for this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, it was always underpriced pre-COVID. You used to be able to get $1 million as a business for about $700 a year, flat coverage, everything included. Then COVID happened, then work from home happened, and all the big insurance companies took about 120% losses across the board. Insurance doesn't work on a net negative. That's a universal rule. They have to be profitable. You guys have all seen your car insurance quotes in the last few months, I'm sure. Not fun, right? Not fun. So what we saw is now to get that same coverage, the cost you'll pay goes into the thousands of dollars a year, even if you're a single man operation. I'm getting some feedback. DL Perry, oh, there we go. She's good. Yeah, I was getting some reviews from me.
Some what?
Sorry. You're good. We're good now. So where was I? Right, cyber insurance. What we're seeing is it costs a lot to keep the insurance, and there's a bunch of technical questions that no small business was ever expected to answer previously. Like, do you have MFA? Do you have man detection response? Do you have vulnerability detection? Are you doing penetration tests? I've had so many people come to me and go, what the heck is this? How do I answer this? I don't understand, right? And for good reason. It was like an overnight change. On top of that, when you do get the policies, they have these things now called sublimits. Sublimits mean, yeah, you have $1 million policy for these 10 different activities, though, we're only going to pay a quarter of that. Get financially defrauded, we're not going to pay your $1 million. We'll pay you 20,000. Get, somebody takes your data, we're not going to pay you $1 million. We'll pay you 100,000. They basically have capped their liabilities to make the whole thing economic, and it works. They are up, I believe, about 33% profitability now. The insurance carriers fix the ratio, but the problem is it puts more of the responsibility on you from the financial perspective. Because if you ever filled out an application that has a ton of questions, those things are legally binding contracts. You have to fill it out 100% accurate, or you always run risk of being in breach of contract. And honestly, it's a moving target. Things change so much in the last 5 years. There is no real unified accepted standard anymore. With car insurance, there are standards the car manufacturers have, right? They're not the standard. They don't come on the market. It's a very methodical thing. There's things the car manufacturer or the car insurance company will always pay for, and things they absolutely never pay for. For example, you get an fender bender, you have comprehensive coverage. As long as the damages are under your overall aggregate, you're going to be taken care of. However, if you, please don't ever do this, you get DUI, driving under the influence, and you get in a catastrophic car accident, they're going to consider looking at it. That's gross negligence, right? When I agreed to insure you and transfer risk, I assumed you were a healthy person of sound mind and body. And you willfully turned and took that away from us. We're not going to pay that. We're seeing a very similar theme rise out in the cyber world. The problem is it's way more murkier because it's so new. I felt compelled, I told you my story already, to help small businesses because as a technology professional, this is what I was seeing. This stuff has real life consequences and it hurts real people. Half of the companies, when they get hacked for the next 6 months, they lose between 11 and 20% of their revenues. You're a small business, that's devastating. That'd be devastating for me. I have 10 employees now, but if I lost 20% of my revenue in 1 month, somebody is on danger of losing their job, unfortunately. That's really where that would be at. 92.4, almost 93% of attacks now are those phishing emails where they start because they're so darn effective. And unfortunately, everybody here has a bad day. And make you feel better, I won't call anybody to the carpet. I had a bad day 6 months ago. I was distracted. I was busy. I was expecting a very important email from a vendor of mine. And I expected, because I'm a security guy, the email was going to be encrypted. I got off the phone with the vendor. 3 minutes later, I got an email in my inbox that said encrypted email. And because all the timing was perfect, I said, okay, that's them. I didn't even check the email. I clicked it, right? Because I wanted to get this done. I wanted to get the thing I needed and get done with my day. It was a phishing email. And I almost gave away a hacker my credentials. Now, luckily, as a cybersecurity company, I have some safeguards in there that saved my bacon. But I run a cybersecurity company. I am probably one of the most knowledgeable people. I'd say I'm in the top 5% of knowledgeability in our population just by what I do, right? And that's not a humble brag. That's just a reality of where it is. But I still have a bad day and I can fall for it. Phishing emails are very effective. About 58% of attacks now are directed towards small businesses, statistically speaking. On average, if you do have insurance, it takes about 60 to 120 days, even if they fully reimburse you for damages, to get your claims paid. So you've got to make up that difference. And this last stat, and I'm going to move faces here real quick, is the one that I was seeing. And I felt a lot of people who said they went out of business because of COVID, there was more to the story from my experience. And I can't go into details. There's a whole lot of confidentiality, so I can't get too much specifics. But I came across several scenarios where, yes, COVID was a factor, but also them getting the business getting hacked and taking real damages was a factor of why they went out of business 2020. Okay, that's a lot of scary. And I am very clear here. I am not trying to scare people with fear of uncertainty and doubt, but it's a very serious topic. And a lot of people, because we're not used to things changing this rapidly. Business usually changes in 10-year increments when we see new trends and changes, right? Think about the advent of using email, how long that took to take off. Think about the advent of using, having everyone gets a cell phone, the iPhones, right? Like, we don't see these changes happen in 3 or 4 years where everything gets changed overnight. This unfortunately has been a hard thing for a lot of entrepreneurs going on a journey to say, well, I'm so small, right? This doesn't impact me. And that used to be true. It absolutely, before 2020, used to be true. There's two main reasons it changed. One was COVID, which we already talked about. But the other was a lot of hackers. So it used to be a hacker, to be a cyber criminal, I should say. There are some people who call themselves hackers. They're good people that try to teach the world security, and I gotta be careful of that. So I'll call them cyber criminals for the rest of this time. A lot of cyber criminals they had to have technical skills, right? They had to know what they were doing, have all the tech skills in their heads, have a certain moral bent. And obviously, you don't just wake up one day and say, "I'm going to be a cyber criminal." You kind of have to get there. And there's only so many hours in the day and so much to do. So for 10 years, we've heard about hacks. Wasn't really a thing that affected us, right? It was sort of contained by the fact that there wasn't enough people to really cause a problem. But what do we all subscribe to now? Software as a service. How many of you have a Gmail, like a paid Google account? Anybody here have a paid Google account? Okay. Anybody here have a paid Microsoft account? Those are really complicated tools, right? But what has Microsoft and Google done? They've made them very slick, very click and point, very easy to navigate. I can teach my 89-year-old grandfather who's in the beginning stages of dementia how to use Gmail. It is a very simple tool. And the cyber criminals said, wow, look at Microsoft, look at Google. Look how much money they make just selling subscriptions for tools and making them easy for anybody to use. Why don't we do that? Why don't we, instead of being the hackers, develop tools, be the IT support, and sell the tools instead to anybody who wants them so that anybody can use them? Thus was born the cottage industry of cybercrime. There are now high rises in countries like Russia, Iran, where hacker doesn't look like a guy in a hoodie. He looks like you and me. He's wearing a hoodie, not hoodies. He's wearing a collared shirt. He's got a headset on or earbuds on, and he works 9-to-5 job. And that is the crazy world we live in now. And unfortunately, the culture over there, they never see your face. They never see you as a person. You're just market product to them, both personal and professional. And so that essentially, even in the last year, has made my job even tougher because people are ask themselves, what do I have that a hacker would care about? Do you have a checking account? Yes, everybody here has a checking account. You've got something they want now. Okay, let's recap here. About a half hour into the talks. I'm right on track. Can we avoid it? No. There's a lot of things I won't unilaterally say no to. This is one I am confident to go 100% on the record, myself included in this room. Every single one of us will eventually be targeted and attacked by a cyber criminal. It's a statistical game at this point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. 2, I wish we could share it. Sometimes you can share it depending on how your business is structured and what you do with your partners and your contracts. But for the most part, all these tools that we use that contain a lot of this liability, whether we like it or not, like email is a great example. There's a lot of stuff in our email that we don't think is that big of a deal, but a cyber criminal would find very attractive and does have legal ramifications. All the platforms that we use for this stuff, Microsoft, Google, AWS, Dropbox, you name it. LastPass, if you guys use LastPass for your passwords. I don't know if anybody here uses that. They all specifically say, nope, all on you. We have, by you clicking that box, you've legally given us the permission to pass the buck to you. The sharing is very, very hard to share that risk. Transfer it. Yes, depends. Insurance is not as simple as it used to be. I really strongly encourage, if you guys in your entrepreneur journey want to look at insurance for this, absolutely find a partner, and I can put some referrals down for you guys easily that specializes in this kind of insurance here in town, a broker that does only this stuff. There's a lot of agents. I'm at a conference and I was talking to a bunch of agents. They sell cyber. They don't know what they're selling. I'd rather you work with somebody who knows what they're doing and be that trusted advisor for you. It is a bit pricey. A lot of people in the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey just simply can't afford it, and that's okay. But it is something you should consider on a regular basis as your business evolves and, finances allow. Okay, remember my little pie chart from the beginning of the thing? 5 ways, right? Well, what have we talked about so far in those last few slides? We talked about sharing, we talked about avoidance, and we talked about transferring. To varying degrees, they're all kind of off the table as far as an end-all be-all to the solution. Where does that leave us with by process of elimination? Really, if we're being honest with ourselves, there's just 2 options on the table. If we can either just do nothing, which is I would call retention, right? Just say, hey, it's going to happen to me. No, thank you. Or, and this is where I'm really teaching people, you do have a choice here. And it's not even one you have to put real money into, especially at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. You can choose to be proactive. And today I'm going to share some steps with you on how you can do that. So how many of you have ever heard of a thing called multi-factor authentication? MFA. Anybody ever heard that? Cool. How many of you actually use it on your stuff? Good. Those of you who raised your hands, amazing. Those of you who didn't, please turn it on all your social media, your email, and your bank accounts. It is a very simple thing to do. I know it's a little annoying, but it makes an attacker's job, I'm not saying it's unbeatable, it makes an attacker's job that much harder. The easiest people in the world for a hacker is the hacker people who don't turn MFA off. So that's step number one. Step number two. How many of you have a subscription to like a password manager? Anybody use like a LastPass, anything like that? Anybody here? Okay, Guy, I saw you raise your hand. Good job. A lot of us are guilty, myself included, at one point in the past of using the same 1, 2, or 3 passwords for everything. Here's the problem with that. All those big companies are getting hacked and all those passwords are getting posted on something called the dark web. You might have heard of that. But these hackers basically buy and sell these passwords they steal from other companies. And so they're not worth anything anymore. And then they post them in open forums. And then what these attackers do is they say, look, I've got an email address. I've got a password. What else can I log into? And they plug it into a robot and off the robot goes. A password manager lets you make a new password for every one of your websites in a way that's easy and not super inconvenient. They have apps for phones. They have your computers. But that way, even if, oh, Lord forbid, Facebook gets hacked and your password from Facebook gets taken and put on the dark web, you're only using that password in Facebook. And you don't have to worry about someone trying to reuse that password to log into your Chase bank account or into your LinkedIn profile or to your email. So password manager is an excellent step. And then, sorry, I'm going to go here. The number three, look at yourself at education. I skipped ahead a little bit, but I like this track a little better. I understand this for most of you, if not all of you, this is not your discipline. And I don't expect you to be 100% experts in this topic. But a lot of us have heard the term growing up. Have you ever heard the term, it's a good idea to be street savvy? I live in Columbus. There's a certain set of rules you follow when you visit the west side of Columbus. I do a lot of ministry work with the refuge ministries. I love those guys. They work exclusively out of the west side of Columbus. I typically am told not to stay there after dark when we're doing ministries. It's just not a safe place. It's not a good idea. It's fair. There are some street savvy rules in the cyber criminal world that I think everybody needs to kind of develop a peripheral awareness of, things that you just don't do. Great example of this, what we talked about today. Don't turn off MFA. If you get the option on all your online platforms, just do it. Don't use the same password for everything. That's another street savvy thing I would expect. I hope people will want to take a chance aware of. There are free resources, and I will happily share them all over the place that educate people. Everything from great YouTube channels that are all about talking to people in a way they can understand as normal folks, not IT folks, to podcasts. I love a podcast. He's one of the most talented orators I've ever read. There's a podcast called The Darknet Diaries. You guys would like to listen to like a good storyteller? He has a gift for telling cybersecurity stuff in a way that a normal person finds engaging and fun. It's sort of like a combination of a true crime podcast and a way you can protect yourself. And I've listened since 2019. I will highly recommend that. He's an amazing storyteller. Darknet Diaries, check that out. But there are resources all over the place that you can just add at a very low friction cost to educate yourself with. Eventually, as your business grows, this is the last piece of advice I'll give, and then I'll segue to what we talked about, which was sort of, I'll pass it back over to Jeff. As your business grows, it's a good idea to do what we call a risk assessment. Entrepreneurs find value in risk, right? Risk is where you make money. It's where you build value. It's where you can really be truly successful at. But risk has to be measured against reward. And you have to have litmus. You have to have measurements of how much risk am I taking on here versus the reward I'm going to get out. Cyber is a really weird one, guys, because not enough people know enough about it to actually measure how much risk they're taking on versus the potential reward, right? It's just sort of a black box. Well, there's a tried and true methodology for that. If you've ever worked for a big company, they've probably done something called a risk assessment before. Financial risk assessment, operational risk assessment. If you're working for a big company, it's a very tried and true tactic where someone who understands their environment comes in, looks at what they have going on for a very nominal fee, and paints a picture of, okay, here's where you're at. This is what matters. This is what we find concerns with. Do you agree? And gives you a roadmap of if there is something a gap that your company, as you build out your business, needs to address, you can do it. Our assessment when I do it for companies, I do this for companies with 5 and over. This is usually where I like to see companies start looking at this. When you have about 5 employees, I would recommend looking into this. You don't even go through me. Like there's plenty of qualified people out there, but our assessment looks like this. I sit down with you, I learn about your business, I see what rules you have in place, if any, at that point, in terms of what you tell your employees they can and can't do. If you have an office, I want to look at it. That's getting more and more rare. A lot of people, as you build a business, are going to build a work from home company. That's totally fine. I want to look at the platforms that you're using, the things that you build your business on. Everybody's going to end up in this world, I think, having a key amount of tools that they build their businesses on, some more than others. I want to make sure those tools are both A, the vendor's taking care of you, and B, you, as you grow your team. I say this carefully. I love people. My heart is with people. I'm in ministry. But people in business are a double-edged sword. They are your greatest strength, but sometimes they can also be your greatest weakness if you're not properly managing the people. I've had, as an employer, employees that have put me in tough predicaments. I want to make sure that as you guys grow, your employees aren't doing stuff they shouldn't do with all your intellectual property, all your work, all your customer information, and give you, if they are, give you a sense of that. And then, of course, I want to check the dark web. And you feel free, if anybody's on Zoom, you can take a screenshot of this. This is totally public information. I'm not considering this intellectual property. But an assessment of any kind of sort, once you're ready for it, should look like this. So I have something for you, because most of you aren't ready for the assessment yet, and that's totally fine. And I don't expect you to be. I really want to give back, because my heart is teaching people about this and doing whatever you can as an entrepreneur within your means to protect yourself. This is a free self-assessment. It's not as good as the full-blown like professional risk assessment, but it's something, and I really spent a lot of time developing this. It's a 20-page little question, an easy answer question. You can score yourself on, say, okay, I have this in place, I don't have this, but it's a great place to build a checklist start. You can either scan the QR code or go to cyber.tabernacle.tech/quiz. I will ask for your email address. Just assume you're a real person. I get a lot of robots visiting that website, unfortunately. So you will have to fill out like your name and email address and all that stuff. But that being said, I promise I won't spam you. It'll email you the quiz at that point, and you are free to use that however you see fit. No strings attached. I'm going to stop there and pass it back to Jeff and team for for the next steps here, because I think we're almost at 15-minute mark. I was right on time, guys. I did it.
Awesome. Thank you, Logan, so much. We want to kind of open it up for questions, but we do ask that if you have questions, just to make sure we can get as many questions answered as possible, be succinct with your questions so that Logan can get to as many as possible if you do have any questions. So I'm going to go ahead, and I don't see anything in the chat, but do you guys have any questions for Logan? But again, keep it brief, just so we can.
I see Sherry raised her hand.
Yep, Sherry. Yep.
Yeah, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
What are your thoughts about those services that offer protection, where they scan the dark web? I believe it's like a Experian or one of those. The reason I ask is I just got a notice about a month ago that AT&T was hacked, and now as a result they're giving like a year or so, whatever it is, protection with Experian, and you have to go in and create an account and all that. What are your thoughts about that? Do you feel like you should, after something like that happens, should you buy additional coverage, or what would you advise?
So I have mixed thoughts and feelings on this, and I don't want to steer you wrong. So I'll try to explain my thoughts without going too much time. Mm-hmm. A lot of those partners, Experian, Equifax, you guys probably remember 2018, Equifax lost 1 and 2 social security numbers for all Americans, right? Also, I don't really trust them, to be honest with you, but B, they partner with a company called LifeLock more often than not for those services. LifeLock got hacked last year. They lost everything that they were protecting. The company supposed to protect your identity lost everything. Yeah, they don't talk about that really, do they? Good PR team. There is a service. It's not sufficient for business, unfortunately. I wish it was, because it's so dirt cheap, but it's a good place to start for personal that I'm becoming a fan of. I've had good experience with, called Aura. If you're going to look at that, it's a combination of identity theft. It gives you a password manager, a little security tool for your computer, and it scans the dark web for you. I wouldn't recommend it to a business. It's just not enough. But for a personal person, it's a great place to start at a very affordable price. So that's spelled AURA. And I don't have a deal with them. That's just my 2 cents of working with consumers, because I don't do consumer stuff that much. So people ask me like, hey, what do I do personally? And I had to do some research. And those are the guys I like.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Any other questions? Oh, Kirby, yeah.
All right, Corey, what's up?
So I have a Mac, and
Mhm.
when I go to sign up for something, it will recommend like a super secure password. Is it okay to use that recommendation?
Depends on how the Mac is set up. Apple, I'll give credit where credit is due. They're probably the more proactive company on security in the tech world, and that's not saying they do everything perfect, but that's good. You're probably using the keychain. As long as the keychain and the encryption is turned on in the keychain, yes, amazing idea. If it's not turned on, you just created a giant repository of passwords that if somebody gets you to click a phishing email, they can extract off your computer. So it's a double-edged sword, and that's why I want to preface that. If you can figure out and Google how to turn on encryption with keychain, make sure it's turned on and it's enabled on your computer, yes, that's an excellent idea.
Okay. Well, I'll double check that. I'll make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do a lot of assessments where people think the encryption's on, and I'm like, no, I got 1,000 passwords out of this thing, and here they are in plain text. And they go, oh, yeah, let's go toggle that box. Let's take 5 minutes in our meeting to go toggle that box.
Where can we find that information to see if we are doing it correctly? I may have missed that. I got on late.
No, no, you're fine. So there's a couple free resources I'm going to post in the chat. So first off is one I built myself, and I posted a link in the chat. And I'll post it again for you because if you got on late, I want to make sure you get it. It's a free self-assessment, sort of like a checklist of saying, hey, am I doing this right? Am I not? Right? Kind of a place to ground yourself. There are free websites that I like and trust. There's a couple cheap paid ones as well. One of the ones that was brought up already was Aura. I like Aura a lot in terms of a base security package for our personal user. I just got to stress, don't make it your security package once your company grows. It's not enough, and they don't advertise themselves as a security package. But the other one I like a lot, and it's a free, I like him as a person. I've run across him a couple times. There's a gentleman out of Australia named Troy Hunt. He's a prolific security researcher, but he really has a heart for people. So he built this giant website where you can just type your email address and your phone number and see if anything's ever been hacked in the list of what was taken right then and there. So you can be proactive about it. It's called haveibeenpwned.com. I just posted it in the chat. If you're ever concerned about, hey, something happened to me historically, go there, put in, he does this in a way, I got a little leery because he started doing one where you could like look up your phone number and stuff. I'm like, oh man, what are you doing with that? But he's very open about how he does stuff. As a security professional, I'll tell you, he does it the best you possibly could in terms of security architecture. So it's very safe to put your stuff in there. And you can see, hey, it's my phone number. I put it in chat. Haveibeenpwned.com.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Highly recommend that website.
Okay.
He's also got a delightful accent. He's got like he was from New Zealand. He moved to Australia. So I can listen to that gentleman talk all day. I'm like, I love your accent. It's great.
All right, anyone else have any questions for Logan? Nope. All right. How about some ahas? What were some highlights for you guys? Takeaways, highlights, aha moments. Anything you want to share along those lines?
I'll share a aha. When you recommended that we use the encryption keychains that are available on our laptops, because
It can be. Macs have it built in. Windows do not yet. However, you can also use a good password manager service, and they're like $5 a month. That's also a good option too.
just Google password manager and things will come up.
Yeah, here I'll put the ones I like in chat, and I've done some research on them, so I feel reasonably confident. There's one called Bitwarden and one called Keeper. They're both extremely reasonable. I think they're $7 a month each. The rent, and if you use either of those, you do about as good as you can with those.
Because I kind of thought if I give someone my password, then it's vulnerable. And I've never used a site. I don't know if you put your passwords in there, but that was always something that kept me from using it. Again, right?
There's risk. There's risk. And don't be wrong, it has backfired spectacularly in the past. There's a company called LastPass you might have heard of. They lost all the passwords because they stunk at security and they didn't tell anybody. One of the reasons I'm comfortable recommending these two, and this is obviously just a personal thing, they opened up to me. I have vendor relationships with them and they allowed me to audit them. And I saw the practices I would want to see as a security professional being done in both these companies. That's why I feel comfortable recommending them, because they actually basically gave me some confidential and look at their company. So this is coming from me, not from any like market research. Just I literally audited these companies for my customers.
Okay.
But any quick other ahas before we transition into the announcements?
Yeah, I'm just amazed at the number of people who are getting hacked and the companies that are doing it. I mean, hopefully I can capture this part I missed, but I'm scared now. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm going back
You
to
don't need to,
pencil.
if you're being proactive though, you are absolutely a better spot than the person who's not, because I this is the logic I fall back on. Cyber criminals are not the most ethical working people on the planet. If it's harder to get to you, your chances are they're going to move on to somebody else because there's more fish in the sea. So by being proactive, it's a double-edged sword. But being proactive, you're actually more safe than you ever have been, because now you're harder to get at. They're going to go, okay, not worth my time. I'm going to somebody else who isn't. That's the takeaway. I want to give some hope there. If you do proactive stuff, you really get some benefits back.
Okay.
Yeah, I just like the reminder just about, I mean, I have a unique password for every single login. I don't have the same. And at first I'm like, how am I going to do that? But you're right with those password managers. So I use Dashlane.
Yep, that's a good one.
So now I have, yeah, yeah, anyway, it was just a good reminder to put these tips into place. Is it 100%? No, not always, but you're better off, putting these tips into practice than not doing anything at all. So, all
I'm going to
right.
put them in chat too, the tips that I put in there, just if anybody wants to copy them. I know I listed them out last.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, if there's no more questions or no more ahas, Logan, thank you so much for coming and presenting to us today. I know this topic can be very scary, especially when you get an email or a notification saying, which I have recently, that my info is on the black web now. Like, oh, what do I do? And I'm actually getting phone calls now, trying to get scammed out of things. So it can be a very scary, thing to have happen to you. So thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge and giving us some tips on how we can protect ourselves. Because like you said, it is real. There are people out there working 9 to 5 just to look for people to scam and get their money. So thank you so much for just your knowledge and information. And I just, one thing I love about you is you can tell that you have a heart for people and for helping them protect
One
themselves.
One final tidbit too. No shame for ever falling for this stuff. A year ago, my wife fell for a scam that cost me $1,000. Now she has to sit in our mandatory company trainings. She's not happy with me, but I'm like, what are you going to tell me? You don't need the training? Okay.
That's awesome.
And you haven't anybody.
How do you know how do you know? How do you find out about that? Can't they just be in the background looking at all your stuff and you may never know?
Yeah, there is some unknowns here. Yes, the answer to your question is yes. The best thing you can do is practice due diligence with some of the things I did when it makes sense for you as a business. Obviously, I'm biased because I sell this stuff. I do believe the investment, though, in cybersecurity in a business is essential eventually, but I also believe it's an appropriate timing question. If you're at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey, you don't have the budget for that yet, and that's okay. So do the things that make sense, that are common sense, like MFA, like a good password manager. If they are in your stuff, it makes their lives much harder with just those two things alone. And like you said, Jeff, a little bit of street savviness. Don't click on the emails coming because you know what to look out for, right? I do entertaining podcasts specifically are my personal poison of choice for street savviness, but your mileage will vary. They're great articles. I recommended the podcast Darknet Diaries because I find it very entertaining. I like a good story where I'm actually entertained, but yeah, you can find resources that are great for this.
Okay.
All right.